The Mega Dimension has blessed us with many new additions, Mega and otherwise. So much so that we're going with double our usual number of the new game's winners. Though sadly, one of those winners is not Flygon, who still doesn't have a Mega. Even Chimecho got one, as well as some Pokemon that already had a Mega. Surely one day justice will be done, but for now, we're jumping in with the return of a Gen 4 in-game fan favorite with Mega Staraptor. Gen 4 fans rejoice, for Staraptor has received a Mega, and not only is it an upgrade, it makes Raptor into a more well-rounded Pokemon overall. It easily could have just been amped up into an ultimate kamikaze Brave Bird machine, and that would have been just fine, but Game Freak really leaned into the implicit fighting type that we've all considered it to have ever since we delighted in its learning close combat upon evolving from Staravia back in Diamond and Pearl. The incredible benefits of this change include Mega Staraptor losing its Stealth Rock weakness, becoming neutral instead, allowing it to Brave Bird more, which it can also do more easily now that Flying Resist really don't want any part of its secondary stab, which is also actually tremendously spammable in its own right, with most Fighting Resist deathly afraid of Brave Bird. This beautifully synergistic pairing, the tremendous effectiveness of which has been superbly demonstrated by Hawlucha and Galarian Zapdos, is a perfect extension of Staraptor's already menacing game, but that's far from everything it's got. First, the obligatory stat buffs. Mega Staraptor gets a nice boost to the attack and speed from which it'll wield its new dual stabs. The speed hits an especially valuable benchmark, but it also gains respectable bulk. It was a real glass cannon before, even when using Intimidate as its ability, but now, though it's hardly a wall, it can certainly take a hit, which also makes it more apt roosting off Brave Bird recoil. What really pushes Mega Raptor onto this highly competitive list though, are the excellent additions to its move pool. Perhaps most notable is the amazing coverage it gains with Blaze Kick, whereas ordinarily, the dual stabs would be stifled by the Steel Fairy type of Magearna and Mega Mawile. With Blaze Kick, it's able to hit them much harder and more immediately than relying on Brave Bird, admittingly impressive as it is even many bulkier resists. Blaze Kick also has the outstanding benefit of instantly destroying Mega Scizor. Mega Staraptor is also going to be hitting even harder because it has a new boosting move in Bulk Up, which will not only push its attacks over the threshold for many opponents that just barely hang on, but also makes it more difficult to take out on the physical side, and synergizes gorgeously with its newly gained defense, especially if it chooses to roost. Of course, it could also go with the coverage of Blaze Kick to really deck Magearna, or another wickedly useful move it gained with Knockoff, which, in addition to the eternal utility of item removing, getting rid of an opponent's Rocky Helmet will make Mega Staraptor stabs much scarier, especially Brave Bird. The super effective coverage against Ghost and Psychic also enhances its stab close combat something fierce. Ultimately, Mega Staraptor is overflowing with options, and that's not even getting into its more offbeat additions like Outrage. Maybe it'll be used as a Zygarde lure. Whatever it does, it's a fitting, terrific buff for a fan favorite, and it could very well wind up being even more dangerous depending on the ability it receives. Now, speaking of Gen 4 favorites, we have, of course, Mega Lucario Z. In keeping with its status as a top-tier fan favorite, Lucario has hardly been overlooked by Game Freak, but it's also been a while since it's been in the competitive spotlight. It received one of the most overpowered Megas back in the XY days, with tremendous power both physically and specially, as well pushed further by its adaptability ability, and a perfect troll of a speed stat that got the jump on even Thundurus. In the 2 generations without Megas though, Lucario's taken a back seat. At the time of this video, it's sitting in Gen 9's NUBL, but it's back with a vengeance, brandishing a new Mega that makes the old one look quaint, and that's without taking into account its ability. Game Freak's gone so all out with the Make Mega Lucario Z insane project. They even took some points out of its original base attack stat to really pile on the buffs without going over the plus 100 limit to its added base stat total. Nor did they bother with improving its defenses whatsoever, as they did with the original Mega Lucario's defense. Nope, there's no pretense about Mega Lucario Z. It is a special attacker and an overwhelming one at that, perfectly designed to fire off its signature Aura Spheres. Its special attack is cranked to an astonishing base 164, but just as important, if not more, is its absurd speed at base 151. It is 1 point more than the incredible base 150, previously boasted by the Mega Alakazam that outsped everything else by a country mile. To go even faster is as insane as it is deliberate. This stat buff is all that Mega Lucario Z is getting, but that's really all it needs. Even if its ability winds up being functionally useless, it won't matter, as it's already perfectly poised to unleash some truly unreal damage. During its Gen 4 glory days, Lucario's inner focus was only occasionally useful, but it almost didn't need an ability for its meta-defining Swords Dancer to wreak havoc. And that's pretty much what Mega Lucario Z is looking like with Nasty Plot, except it's so much faster than everything, it can even potentially skip on the priority of Vacuum Wave in order to max out its super effective coverage. Alongside the dual stabs of Aura Sphere and Flash Cannon, it can throw in Shadow Ball or Dark Pulse for good measure against Psychics and Ghosts. Heck, throw in Dragon Pulse to take on Zygarde. Of course, you might very well need Vacuum Wave for opposing Mega Lucario Z, but regardless of moveset, it's going to be a high-speed Terra. Now onto the other Z Mega with Mega Absol Z. Absol's original Mega was an interesting one. Great 115 base speed, outstanding base 150 attack, and even a highly effective base 115 special attack stat to throw a bit of mixed attacking into its game with the coverage of Fire Blast or Ice Beam. But its main appeal was its amazing ability, Magic Bounce. It was an attacker that would bounce attempts to Thunder Wave or Will-O-Wisp it back against its aggressor, and it might even switch in as you tried to Stealth Rock or Spikes to wind up making you set hazards up against yourself. Mega Absol Z though looks to take things to another level, and that's without an ability thus far. It cranks the base attack up even higher to base 154, but like Mega Lucario, it also clocks in at that impossible to overemphasize base 151 speed that offers it so many targets as to functionally make it even stronger. Assisting it further in this regard is its newly added beautifully complementary secondary Ghost typing. Immunities to close combat and rapid spin are incredible and provided with defensive utility that doubles as a window to start hammering the opponent with its own attack. But Ghost also powers Mega Absol Z's offensive onslaught further. As while it doesn't have any super effective coverage distinct from Dark, what it does do is provide a stab that hits Fairy and Fighting types neutrally, which is excellent and far preferable to attempting to cram overly specific coverage options into a move pool that already has 4 move slot syndrome. In recent generations, Ghost has become a contender for best offensive type in the game, but Mega Absol will use it a little differently than its special attacking Shadow Ball spamming counterparts. Its most readily usable Ghost stab is Shadow Claw, which at 70 base power is a little too weak even off such an impressive attack stat after a Swords Dance, so that's out of the question. Instead, Mega Absol Z will use the newly gained Phantom Force. Anyway, Phantom Force awakens a rare yet potent strategy, that of a 2-turn move. Usually 2-turn moves like Fly are the first things you learn to dismiss when crossing over from in-game to competitive, but there are exceptions, like Dragon Dance Bounce Gyarados and Shadow Force on Giratina Origin and Swords Dance Arceus, both normal and Ghost. Basically, they're so threatening, you can't exactly afford to easily switch around them, meaning that as long as they can play halfway carefully, they can afford the upsides of the move's power. Phantom Force Absol Z, especially with a Swords Dance boost in tow, looks to continue in this tradition. As a bonus, it also gains Shadow Sneak as another stab priority move to go with its flagship Sucker Punch. But as with Mega Lucario Z, Mega Absol Z is so much faster than everything else, it can also ditch priority in favor of maximum Swords Dance boosted damage with Knockoff, Phantom Force, and Superpower. Now that we've gone with 2 Z Megas, we'll change things up and go with a non-Mega that's still going to be dishing damage on par with one with Terrakion. For how unwallable it is on paper, Terrakion often finds itself coming up short in practice. It's not weak by any stretch of the imagination. Its base 129 attack stat is similarly monstrous today as to when it was introduced back in Gen 5. The killer base 108 speed remains a superb benchmark, and its rock fighting stab combination is a dream. Beautifully complementary in coverage, both super effective and neutral, as well as packing serious base power on both its moves. So why then does Terrakion struggle to reduce the opponent to splinters as quickly as it needs to, which is to say, instantly? If it takes any longer, it's likely to get KO'd itself, not because it's frail, as it isn't. It's got very solid natural bulk, but because the typing that gives it such brutal stab also renders it with weaknesses, which isn't necessarily a fatal flaw if it can dish out the damage quick enough. And how can it not? Terrakion's close combat is an auto-deletion machine, one of the most automatic KOs that was equally as feared in its day as much as all the Draco Meteors and rain-boosted Hydro Pumps running around. Stone Edge isn't too far behind in terms of power, right? Well, yes, it's not worlds apart in and of itself, but it does fail to reach close combat's incredible destructive threshold, and this does make enough of a difference to where Terrakion comes up short against crucial fighting-resistant targets. Basically, while Stone Edge does hit Psychic, Ghost, and Fairy types hard, it tends to just barely come up short, and that tends to mean Terrakion is toast. What it needed was a rock move that was close combat level strong, but instead it received Head Smash, which in turn makes close combat look like the weak one. The hefty recoil is nothing to sneeze at, but it's a worthwhile trade-off for the violently over-the-top 150 base power damage that Terrakion will now leave in its wake. Choice Band Head Smash comes dangerously close to one-hit KOing its old enemy Gliscor, while any wise ideas about slowing it down with resist tend to either run afoul of the aforementioned one-hit KO machine close combat or just get bulldozed by the sheer power of Head Smash, since even something as bulky as max HP Magirda runs the risk of a 2-hit KO, especially with Stealth Rock. Plus, Terrakion's 2-move stab coverage is so good, it can easily afford to run both Stone Edge and Head Smash on the same set, so it isn't obligated to incur the recoil, and it still has room for coverage. While the Magirda threatening Earthquake is one option, Terrakion has now gained another excellent coverage option, Heavy Slam, which immediately decks most fairy types in ways its previous option, Iron Head, couldn't dream of. Terrakion's a pretty heavy poke, and so is going to deal some pretty heavy slams, which alongside its attack means even the most physically bulky Clefable risks getting KO'd for full health. Being able to threaten such enormous damage, if not a KO, against such a crucial type is an excellent expansion of Terrakion's reach. reach, but Head Smash alone would be enough to let it finally bust skulls the way it aims to. Now this brings us to the next Pokemon, Terrakion's fellow Sword of Justice, Keldeo. Keldeo, being the incredibly rare offensive water type without ice coverage, has long since limited its offense. In fact, when viewed this way, it's the one thing that kept it from being broken when it was first introduced. Technically, it did have ice coverage, but other than the universal hidden power Ice, which it only used for the specific revenge killing of Choice Scarf, Keldeo was limited to Icy Wind, which it still did use to great effect. The speed lowering effect made it a pain for the Laddie twins to switch in, or could prevent something like Multi-Scale Dragonite from effectively Dragon Dancing in front of it. But Keldeo still would have taken the power of Ice Beam if it had it, for how decisively it would have sliced through the grasses and dragons that were among the few Pokemon that could actually stave it off, such as Amoonguss and Mega Latias, both of which, for all their bulk, were resoundingly 2-hit KO'd even without Stealth Rock in the picture. Now, Power Creep has rendered Keldeo a tad less impressive than it once was, but Ice Beam's superb coverage is exactly what's been missing. Water, Fighting, and Ice are excellent coverage. Keldeo is certainly not lacking the power to use it, and it's still got its 4th move slot open, which it can now dedicate to support its team, even if it won't be particularly dangerous on its own at a given time. With Stealth Rock, Keldeo takes advantage of the many switches it forces. Its power also means it's not going to be easy to instantly remove against, and if it really wants to lean into defog blocking, it's also got Taunt. Additionally, the resilience of its useful resist, including Stealth Rock, alongside good natural bulk, means Keldeo can repeatedly switch in the way it previously did just to bombard the opponent to get rocks back up if they are removed, though it can also function as an effective dedicated pace-setting lead rocker just like Terrakion. A little goes a long way, and these two moves, especially Ice Beam, are big in getting Keldeo back on the horse, so to speak. Now we're moving on from Swords of Justice, but we've got another non-mega fighting type here with Marshadow. Marshadow's Technician Stoked Terror was already ferocious with the Scizor-esque boost to its priority stab Shadow Sneak, while the coverage of its Rock Tomb was bolstered to a 90 base power destroyer of Ho-Oh, and back in Gen 7, before the removal of Hidden Power, its Hidden Power Ices were Ice Beam level strong, letting it muscle past Zygarde complete despite its much lower special attack stat. And Marshadow isn't completely reliant on Technician, as its Ghost Fighting stabs are as complementary as they are powerful in both raw damage and the impressive speed stat they're coming from. But the added Technician boosts really serve to push it over the edge. That's what its new buffs are. More of a good thing on a Pokemon of already stratospheric offensive standards. Marshadow already enjoys the Deal Sealer of Bulk Up's power boost, but now with Power Up Punch, it can attack while doing so, and thanks to its Technician boost, it's actually dealing respectable damage on par with its priority, making it even easier to overwhelm a target with Spectral Thief or Close Combat. Said priority is no longer just Shadow Sneak either, as with the addition of Mach Punch, it now has Technician boosted stab priority for both types. In fact, its coverage is so good, it can very well run dual stab on one moveset and cover pretty much everything between the Ghost type Spectral Thief and Shadow Sneak and the Fighting type Close Combat and Mach Punch. Basically, it's Marshadow 2, more Marshadow, which is menacing. Now back to the Megas with Mega Meowstic. Meowstic, which was honorably mentioned in our previous video for the eye-popping assortment of new moves overflowing with more utility than it could possibly cram into one moveset, it's suddenly a multifaceted hazard setter able to throw rocks and both types of spikes at the opponent, while shutting opponent's own utility and healing down with Taunt and Heal Block, or even potentially supporting its own team's health with Wish. The problem was that it was still Meowstic. It has base 104 speed, but no other stat that could be considered even workable. Prankster as an ability for hazard setting is amazing, but it'd be a limited niche. However, with this DLC, Meowstic has now received a Mega and can actually do things itself, rather than simply being a hazard setting machine. Not that there's anything wrong with the latter, but Mega Meowstic offers more. As a bonus, its utility move pool has gotten even better, as now it is able to provide teammates free switches through the newly gained Teleport. But you might wonder, Teleport has negative priority, and isn't Meowstic frail even with a Mega? It's no tank, that's for sure, but now that it has base 101 special defense, it can take a special hit. However, it's more going to be using Teleport on predicted switches, where it will function to be no different from any other switch move. However, Teleport really is a bonus in the truest sense, not a necessity, but certainly a good tool to have. The main appeal with Mega Meowstic though is that it's brandishing an impressive 124 speed stat and a special attack you can do something with. At base 141, it's packing a serious wallop, especially with Nasty Plot alongside the coverage of both Thunderbolt and crucially, another move it gained in this new DLC, Moonblast, which lets it now crush dark types. Mega Meowstic comes across as a sort of Alakazam adjacent threat that trades the steel crushing coverage of Focus Blast for its bevy of support moves. In addition to the moves it gained, it also packs Heal Bell, which might well support itself as much of its teammates, meaning it doesn't necessarily have to run from Toxics and can thus more freely dish out its hits or hazards. Meowstic becoming at all viable is reason for celebration. In this vein, we're moving on to another Pokemon that just needed a bit of help with Mega Golisopod. Y'all are stupid, exclaimed Guzma, back in Pokemon Sun and Moon. This must have really resonated with someone at Game Freak one way or another, because Guzma's signature Pokemon has now been given a Mega, and it's a nigh ideal example of what a Mega should be. It pumps up the stats, sure, but it's also been given a type change that maintains the original concept while breathing fresh life into it. Golisopod certainly made intriguing use of its bug water typing, but there tends to be a ceiling on that sort of thing. Now though, its Mega is Bug Steel, and the ceiling has been raised much higher. Indeed, Mega Golisopod does resemble some sort of new age Scizor, but it's still very much its own Pokemon, as seen in its primary appeal. A tremendously useful fake-out-esque stab first impression, which is now brandished off of a stunner of a base 150 attack stat. Once that first turn is exhausted, it's laying down superb team support with spikes, and even knocking off some heavy-duty boots to make sure their impact is felt. If it needs to use Bug Stab after the first turn, it's able to throw some healing into the mix with Leech Life. It's also got excellent water coverage, both priority and otherwise, in Aqua Jet and Liquidation, which, while no longer stab in its Mega form, are able to target bug-resistant fire types nicely. Rounding its coverage out is the trusty Steel Destruction of close combat. Now here's where the new additions come in. The Scizor comparison feels more apt now that Golisopod's been given U-Turn, which it will now be able to use more freely that it's neutral to Stealth Rock and not weak to it. Additionally, Mega Golisopod will be able to reap the benefits of having many solid resists and only one weakness by virtue of the fact that both its defenses have been pumped way up. In fact, it is much bulkier than Mega Scizor, which is considered quite bulky and has less in all three defensive stats. The downside is that Mega Golisopod lacks recovery, like Roost, but that's what Leech Life is for. And for this level of tanking, you can support it with something like Wish or Grassy Terrain, especially when it's threatening to hit the opponent so hard in return. Game Freak made the right choice. Other than a useless +10 to its base special attack, which was probably just so they wouldn't go completely overboard with its buff, they didn't bother trying to fix Golisopod's speed at all. It'll always be slow, which holds it back, but it's hitting hard and tanking even better. Funnily enough, it did receive agility, but if Golisopod's going first, it's because of its priority. Similarly, redundant move pool additions were Night Slash, a worse knockoff, and Gunk Shot, whose power is nice, but Golisopod already has Fairy and Grass types covered. The former in the case of Ironhead, that becomes a Steel Stab upon Mega Evolving. Now, speaking of steals, we're turning to another Gen 7 Pokemon with Mega Magearna. Magearna is a pretty all-around perfect Pokemon. It terrorized OU with its perfect typing, alongside an incredible move pool, power, and bulk. In fact, its bulk and typing were so good that it was an excellent defensive Pokemon in not just Gen 7 OU, but Ubers as well, as its utility moves were also excellent. And that's before Gen 9 gave it spikes. The one thing holding Magearna back was its low speed. It got around that with Shift Gear, one of the most frightening late-game sweepers there was, or occasionally even Trick Room, but ultimately, the one point of solace with the Gear Bunny was that you would generally go first against it. With its Mega though, it's far from impossible, but you sure have fewer options now, as there is a lot between base 65 and 95, and it no longer has to Shift Gear to destroy a great many relevant targets. It's now faster than Landorus Therian. Of course, that's not the only thing frightening about Mega Magearna. Game Freak didn't bother with its defenses, not that Magearna needed the help if it was taking on Xerneas and friends, and instead pushed its already impressive special attack to a blindingly high base 170, aka the Kyurem White benchmark. It's going to be especially good at dishing out damage one of its usual two ways. Either it immediately sprays as much damage at the opponent as possible with Floor Cannon, just like the dominant choice spec set from Gen 8, or it completely takes over and cleans up the late game with Shift Gear. It could probably do both in the same game if it wanted to, given the number of opportunities it gets through bulk typing, and now with the increased number of targets its new speed gives it. But stronger, cartoonishly so, and much faster, you couldn't possibly ask for anything more. But not for nothing, the major boost to its attack has the possibility to be significant as well. Seeing as Magearna can do pretty much anything with its 5 million Shift Gear variants, it also had the possibility to utilize Shift Gear's usually useless attack boost by wielding Stab Ironhead, which let it break even Chansey. It's specific, but again, it's Mega Magearna. It can do anything. But before we go into our grand finale, we've got some honorable mentions to rattle through quickly. Mega Trimeco, while too slow to be top tier, is a welcome buff for a Pokemon overlooked for too long, gaining half steel typing, superb special attack, good defenses, and some sweet additions to its move pool in Boom Burst, as well as new Stab and Flash Cannon. Clearly, the overlooked Gen 3 Pokemon was picked explicitly to mock Flygon's continued lack of Mega. Then again, Raichu getting 2 of them did that as well. Beyond the Megas, Tyranitar received Scorching Sands, which is excellent, tremendously fitting design-wise, and T-Tar distributing burns will be very difficult to withstand given how badly it ruins so many of its usual answers. Additionally, Milotic receiving Calm Mind makes us thankful this isn't one of its earlier gens where it'd be incredible, and Cofagrigus received a litany of supporting excellence in Parting Shot, Thunder Wave, Stealth Rock, and Icy Wind. Now we'll finish things off with a Pokemon that was already crazy busted, but now has a Mega with Mega Baxcalibur. Baxcalibur tore Gen 9 OU to ribbons with its gargantuan base 145 attack, Dragon Dance, and tremendously powerful dual stabs, accentuating providing this was wonderful natural bulk courtesy of an astonishing high HP stat alongside good defenses, especially physically, which got pushed to some pretty crazy extremes in snow and let it set up in front of great tusk close combat. Basically, even if Baxcalibur didn't immediately crush you, you probably weren't taking it out in return. You were likelier to be giving it more dragon dances. Even Baxcalibur's speed at quote-unquote only base 87 is all it needs. It gets the job done perfectly. Game Freak agrees because with this Mega, its speed is untouched. Maybe they knew it would be too much if boosted, but then again, Baxcalibur is too much as is. Buffing it at all is Looney Tune. Well, the saving grace, if it can be called that, is that 30 of the 100 points added to Baxcalibur's base goes to its special attack, which will not be used at all. Maybe this is just what Game Freak needs to maintain plausible deniability, but that's going to be tough to do when they've elected to not just buff what was already extreme about Baxcalibur, but to buff it egregiously. First, its damage output will now be even bonkers, with an attack stat that now sits at a vertigo-inducing base 175, making it stronger than Cure in Black. Secondly, it was already dragon dancing often multiple times in front of almost everything thanks to base 115 HP, 92 defense, and 86 special defense. It now had both base defenses boosted by 25, which is a staggering increase for totals. Most walls would feel blessed to have 115, 117, and 101 defenses. Mega Baxcalibur simply uses such bulk to more efficiently orchestrate its dragon dance destruction, though with its power, that isn't quite necessary. This is an instant contender for their early ban list, the kind of Pokemon that runs around the first few days of the generation just so everyone can try it out before it's reduced to Zygarde Complete-esque memories of, can you believe that was ever allowed? And thank you so much to our Platinum patrons. Thank you to Amphozenus, Alex Sable, Anthony Belval Renault, Daniel Isbeast, Corman, Eric Dissing, Funky, Glitcherton, Hal, Jack G, King Yabber, Nightfall, Megaman VGC, Mojo Gameslayer, Nurse Jake, One Penguin to Rule, Pretzel SP, Seagulls Incorporated, Sojiro Sakura, Spavoon, Gylaria, Soras and Croxon, Shiwei Miji, Stoneface Colin, Kiboflu, Wardine, Zathor for their major support of our videos.